Picture the exact momento you get cold today. You reach for a switch or a dial or a phone, and in about 4 seconds the problem is solved. Now delete that switch. Delete the whole grid behind it. Put yourself outside, in skin built for the African savanna, in a wind that can drop your body temperature to a fatal level in under 3 hours. That was the actual test your ancestors faced, not once, but every single winter for hundreds of thousands of years. And here's the strange part. On paper, they should have lost. At the coldest point of the last ice age, somewhere between 26 and 19,000 years ago, ice sheets buried entire continents. Europe, Asia, North America, flat, frozen, and wide open, with nothing to break the wind. Every animal built for that world had some kind of built-in armor. Mammoths carried fur and a thick layer of fat. Cave bears could sleep the whole winter away. Reindeer could just walk to somewhere warmer. Humans had none of it.
No fur worth mentioning, no blubber, no hibernation switch. Strip a human down in that cold and the clock starts running in hours, not days. We were, by every physical measure, the wrong animal in the wrong place at the worst possible time. So how does an animal built for the savanna end up owning an ice age? Not with one clever trick, with a stack of them, layered one on top of the other, and pull out any single layer, the whole thing comes down. Layer 1, fire. Long before the worst of the ice age, humans had already been keeping fire going for hundreds of thousands of years, and by the time the deep freeze hit, they weren't just surviving with it, they were engineering it. Ice age hearths dug up in Eastern Europe weren't the sad little campfires you're picturing. Some burned hot enough to rival a kiln. When wood ran out on the open, treeless plains, people burned fat and bone instead. Fire wasn't a comfort, it was the foundation everything else got built on.
Layer 2. You can't carry a fire with you, so the next problem was carrying the warmth. And the first answer was almost embarrassingly simple. Take the fur off something that already survives the cold and put it on yourself. We have cut marks on bare bones in Northern Europe, in exactly the spot you'd cut to pull a hide off clean, dated to roughly 300,000 years ago. But a loose hide thrown over your shoulders still leaks heat through every gap. It took one small object to fix that: a sewing needle, a sliver of bone with a hole barely wider than a hair, showing up in the record around 30,000 years ago. One tiny tool, and suddenly clothing wasn't a blanket you wore, it was a sealed, fitted layer built for your exact body. Some researchers think better fitted clothing may have been one of the real advantages modern humans had over Neanderthals. Layer 3. Shelter.
Forget the cave painting stereotype. Across what's now Ukraine and Russia, there were no caves and barely any trees, so people built houses out of the biggest material lying around: mammoths. Skulls and leg bones for the base, ribs and tusks curved into a frame, hundreds of bones stacked into a single dome and packed with hide, moss, and earth. Some of these houses are pushing 18,000 years old, sitting right in the coldest stretch of the whole ice age, and the same site was clearly used again and again for centuries. The design was smarter than it needed to be too. The doorway was dug lower than the sleeping floor, so cold air, which is heavier, sank down and pooled at the entrance instead of the space where the family actually slept. Nobody had written down how convection works. They just tested it, generation after generation, until it did. Staying warm keeps you alive tonight.
Winter's real killer is slower than that. It's hunger, stretched out over months with almost nothing left to gather. So Layer 4 wasn't about heat at all, it was logistics. A big kill didn't get eaten, it got managed. Meat was smoked, dried into something like jerky, or packed into pits dug straight into the frozen ground, working like a cellar that never needed power. Some groups even weighed meat down and sank it into cold ponds, using the water itself as a refrigerator. And the hunting was coordinated on a scale that's easy to miss. In eastern France,
Ice Age hunters used fire and teamwork to funnel entire herds of horses and reindeer into natural traps, at the same location, over and over, for tens of thousands of years. This wasn't luck, it was a supply chain. Layer 5 is the one you can't dig out of the ground. Other people.
Pack enough bodies into a small space and you get a real, measurable heat source, which is exactly why far more people lived under one roof than we tolerate today. It wasn't crowding, it was insulation. And here's the darker part. When a hard, cold snap hit, it wasn't the people with the least space who died first. It was the ones living alone, often the elderly, because there was nobody left to share warmth or food with them. When the math got desperate enough, some Ice Age groups are known to have turned to cannibalism just to make it to spring. Layer 5 wasn't just comfort. For plenty of people, it was the only thing standing between them and starving alone. Not everyone solved it the same way.
At the southern tip of South America, the Yagan people lived through genuinely freezing conditions wearing almost nothing because their bodies adapted instead of their wardrobes, running hotter internally, generating more heat from the inside, resting in a tight squat that tucked their limbs in and cut down how much warmth they lost. Their answer to the cold wasn't a coat, it was their own metabolism turned up. And then there's the theory almost nobody expects. At a site in Spain called the Pit of Bones, researchers studying human ancestors from around 430,000 years ago found something strange: bone damage that comes in cycles, growth that stops and starts on a seasonal rhythm, the same signature you see in animals that hibernate. Some scientists have floated the idea that with no fatty reserves to burn through a brutal winter, these early humans may have slowed their bodies down into something like a deep sleep, just to wait it out.
It's not settled science, but it's serious enough that people are still arguing about it. Here's the thing about a stack like this. It only works if every layer holds. No fire, and the cold gets you in hours. Fire, but no fitted clothing, and you can't survive stepping outside it. Clothing, but no shelter, and you can't survive the night. Shelter, but no stored food, and you starve slowly instead of freezing fast. There was no backup system. Every single person alive today is descended from an unbroken chain of ancestors who won that exact bet, winter after winter, for hundreds of thousands of years, without ever once being allowed to lose. You reach for a switch today, and the fight is already over before you notice there was one. It took our ancestors hundreds of thousands of years, layer by layer, to beat a season that used to erase people who got even one part of it wrong. We didn't just survive winter.
We took the deadliest recurring event our species ever faced and shrank it down into something you complain about on the walk from your car to your front door.